It was the first week of July when I settled into my new home, a modest sanctuary on the fringes of Southeast Boise. After a grueling divorce, I craved simplicity, a quiet street, a manageable yard, and a space where I could reclaim my peace. The neighborhood was a picture of calm, nestled where the urban sprawl faded into sprawling trees and winding trails. The stillness was almost tangible, a soothing balm after years of chaos. My house, with its charming blue door and cozy porch, just big enough for a single chair and a potted fern, felt like a fresh start. The big windows welcomed the golden glow of late afternoon, and the scent of aged wood mingled with fresh paint. For the first time in over a year, I slept soundly, no longer needing the drone of a TV to lull me into slumber. The neighbors were a quiet bunch, mostly retirees with meticulously manicured lawns, a few families with kids who rode bikes in lazy circles, and the occasional wind chime tinkling in the breeze. Porches were adorned with untouched patio chairs and quirky gnome statues. I only met one neighbor properly, Ron, a man in his mid-60s who lived next door. He had a slight limp, always wore a neatly tucked polo and khaki shorts, and waved with the enthusiasm of someone who spent their weekends on a golf course. He was polite but reserved, offering little beyond standard pleasantries. About a week after moving in, Ron knocked on my door one evening. His smile was tight, almost forced, his eyes not quite matching the expression. "Did you hear the knocking last night?" he asked casually. I frowned, confused. "Knocking?" I echoed. "Yeah," he said, his tone oddly matter-of-fact. "It usually starts around 2, sometimes earlier. Don't worry, it'll come back." I waited for a chuckle, a sign he was joking. None came. He just nodded and shuffled back to his porch, leaving me standing there, puzzled. That night, I dismissed it as an odd quirk. Maybe he meant a raccoon or a loose shutter. I stayed up late, watching a mindless comedy, then switched everything off around midnight and headed to bed. At 2:12 a.m., I jolted awake to a faint tapping, 3 or 4 quick knocks, sharp and deliberate. I sat up, straining to listen. Silence followed. I told myself it was nothing, a branch against a window, sound carrying from another house. I'd left a window open for the cool night air, so I brushed it off and tried to sleep. The next night it happened again, not loud but unmistakable. 4 knocks, a pause, then 2 more. It wasn't at the front door but somewhere around the house, elusive, as if the sound were trapped in the walls or drifting from outside. I got up, checked every window, the front door. Nothing was out of place. No shadows, no movement. The third night, the knocking grew louder, almost rhythmic, like someone was circling the house, tapping as they went. It wasn't random, not the creak of old wood or the skitter of an animal. It felt purposeful, like someone was testing the house, probing for a response. I texted a friend, half joking about my haunted house. She suggested a security camera, but I deflected, saying it was probably just the house settling. Deep down, I knew better. The sound had an intent that didn't fit with natural explanations. I started leaving a lamp on beside my bed, telling myself it was for comfort, not fear. But the 4th night changed everything. It was past 2 a.m. when the knocking started again. The air outside was still, the neighborhood silent. No crickets, no distant cars, just an oppressive quiet. I stepped outside, heart pounding, and scanned the yard. Across the lawn, Ron's house loomed dark except for one window. There he was, standing motionless, hands pressed against the glass, staring directly at me. Without breaking eye contact, he raised a hand and knocked 3 times on his window. The sound echoed in the stillness, sharp and deliberate. I stumbled back inside, my pulse racing. The next morning I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was eccentric, sleepwalking, or mistaking me for someone else. But the image of his unblinking stare burned in my mind. I started avoiding him, ignoring his waves, checking the mail only at odd hours, keeping the blinds drawn. Still, the knocking persisted. Some nights it came earlier, right after I turned off the lights. Other nights it waited until 3 a.m. Always brief, always intentional, always followed by silence. Then, One night, the pattern shifted. For 2 nights, the knocking stopped. I should have been relieved, but instead I felt a gnawing tension like the calm before a storm. That night I lay awake, waiting. The sound didn't come from the walls or the windows. It came from the ceiling. Soft, deliberate taps like footsteps testing the attic floor. My attic had no flooring, just bare beams. I hadn't even been up there, didn't own a ladder. I sat up, lights on, staring at the ceiling, my breath shallow. At 2:43 a.m., a single knock came from the window beside my bed. I froze, the curtains drawn tight. Another knock. Trembling, I parted the curtain just an inch. Ron's house was dark, but in my yard, under the window, stood a figure. The silhouette was unmistakable. Ron's posture, his slight limp evident, even in stillness. I grabbed my phone and called the police. By the time they arrived, he was gone. They found nothing, called it a misunderstanding, said he hadn't broken any laws. But the next morning I found scuff marks under every window, faint but unmistakable, as if someone had circled the house, tapping, testing, searching. I went to Ron's house. It was empty, his car gone. A neighbor said he'd moved out overnight. No notice, no goodbye. I stayed in that house a while longer, but the knocking never fully stopped. Every so often at 2 or 3 a.m., I'd hear a single tap on a wall, a floor, a window. I don't know if it's real or if Ron's warning that it would come back lodged itself in my mind. All I know is he heard it first, and he was right. At 27, I was hustling as a personal trainer in South Philly, juggling early morning gym sessions and late night clients. My goal was clear: grind for a year, save up, build a roster of private clients, and move somewhere permanent. A condo maybe, where I wouldn't share walls with anyone. For now, I needed cheap and temporary. The townhouse I found fit the bill: month-to-month rent, a decent block, and a listing that didn't scream fixer-upper. It was an old row house split into 2 narrow units, with creaky stairs, slanted floors, and mismatched paint that hinted at its age. The musty smell of old wood clung to the air, but I figured I could handle it for a year. The first night, as I unpacked boxes in the living room, I learned just how thin the walls were. A loud, wet sneeze from next door cut through the quiet, followed by a muffled grumble about antihistamines. It sounded like the guy was standing in my room. I laughed it off, sent a voice note to a friend. I can hear this dude breathing through the wall. But the humor faded fast. Within days, I could hear everything. His TV blaring late-night infomercials, the beep of his microwave, even low humming to commercial jingles. His voice had a strange, gravelly tone, like he was speaking through a fan. At first, I thought he was just eccentric, muttering to himself or talking on the phone. I'd catch snippets of rants, one-sided conversations, always low and close, to the wall. I hadn't seen him, though. No one came or went from his unit. No packages, no trash bins, no signs of life. Then, about a week in, I was washing dishes when I heard it. Matt. My name clear as day, in that same low, deliberate... I froze, sponge dripping in my hand. He said it again, slower, like he was savoring the word Matt. I stepped to the shared wall, waiting. Silence. I told myself I'd misheard. Maybe he was talking to someone else named Matt. It was a common name, right? The next night, it got worse. I was on the couch texting my girlfriend about dinner plans. Tired of typing, I sent a voice message. Let's hit that Thai place on 10th, the one with the red chairs. Minutes later, I heard him through the wall. Thai, sounds good. My stomach dropped. Then quieter, almost a whisper. That place by 10th. The timing was too perfect, too specific. I sat frozen, staring at the wall, waiting for more. The apartment felt like it was shrinking around me. I started avoiding my own home, staying out late, coming back only when I had to. I stopped playing. Music, stopped talking out loud. I'd sit in silence, listening. And every night he was there, muttering about me, what time I woke up, what I ate, what I wore. One night he said, he skipped arms today, weird. It was so casual, so precise, I felt sick. I called out of work one day, stayed home to test him. At 11:15 a.m., I heard, "He's still here. Why is he still here?" I pressed my ear to the wall, heard faint rustling, then slow, deliberate breathing. I knocked 3 times. Silence. Then 3 knocks back. That night I heard, "He's listening." A pause. "He thinks I don't know." My heart pounded. I knocked again, louder, more aggressive. Nothing. I wrote a note. "Hey, could you keep it down at night? These walls are thin." I taped it to his door and left for work. The note was gone when I returned. At 2:03 a.m., a whisper came through the bedroom vent. "You shouldn't have written that." It was calm, emotionless, like he was reading a script. Then a low, drawn-out laugh, like a recording played at half speed. I slammed the vent shut with a chair, my hands shaking. I stayed at my girlfriend's for 3 nights, telling her my neighbor was weird, but sparing the details. I didn't know how to explain it without sounding unhinged. When I returned to grab clothes, I noticed his lights were always on, day and night, glowing behind dusty blinds. There were no footsteps in the snow, no signs of movement. I called the landlord, broke the lease. He sighed, said he'd heard similar complaints from the previous tenant. I knocked on his door once, he said. No answer. Rent's always paid, though. That was it. I packed in 2 hours and left. The last night, as I drifted off on the couch, I heard one final whisper. "Where are you going?" I never saw him. Not once. I live on the edge of Flagstaff, where the desert meets pine forests. Far enough from town for dark, quiet nights, but close enough for pizza delivery. It's a small cluster of houses, private and unassuming. People wave, nod, but don't pry. A perfect fit for someone like me, a veterinarian who prefers animals to people. Animals are honest. They don't hide their intentions. Luna, my German Shepherd Husky mix, came into my life 3 years ago after a rough year. Her deep brown eyes held a quiet intelligence, wary but loyal. She followed me everywhere, slept at my bed's foot, waited by the bathroom door. She was my shadow, my constant. One scorching July afternoon, I let Luna out back after lunch. She loved the yard, napping by the rosemary bushes or chasing bee shadows. I gave her 30 minutes, then called her. No response. I checked the fence, locked, no gaps. I walked the perimeter, called her name, nothing. Panic set in. I spent the day searching, knocking on doors, showing photos, leaving flyers. Neighbors were kind, but hadn't seen her. I called shelters, vet clinics, posted online. By the third night, I was numb, staring at the back door, willing her to appear. Then I heard scratching, faint, familiar. I yanked the door open. There was Luna, but she wasn't herself. Her ears were pinned, her body low, her tail tucked. Her eyes, once warm, were blank, staring through me. She flinched. When I called her name, moved inside like she expected punishment. I sat on the floor, giving her space. Eventually, she curled up against the far wall, back turned. The next morning, I examined her. No injuries. Clean coat, trimmed nails, uncut paws. She hadn't been wandering. Someone had kept her. But she refused food, ignored her bed, hid under the kitchen table. She wouldn't take treats, wouldn't look at me. When I brushed her, she was fine until I touched her tail, then bolted to the bathroom where she stayed for hours. This wasn't stress. This was fear directed at me. On the 4th day, I saw Cliff, my neighbor. He was in his 60s, retired, kept to himself. As I unloaded groceries, he said, "Glad your dog's back." I nodded, but he added, "She was crying that first night. Heard her from my place." My stomach twisted. I hadn't posted when she disappeared, only the date. How did he know it was the first night? I checked my old security camera footage. At 2:18 p.m. that day, there was Cliff, kneeling by the fence holding chicken. Luna approached, tail wagging, then followed him through the gate. 3 days later, at 12:19 a.m., he brought her back, her posture defeated. I showed the police. They said without proof of harm it was a civil matter. I changed the locks, replaced the gate, installed new cameras. Luna stays inside now, but she's not the same. She won't sleep near me, won't eat unless I leave the room. Sometimes she growls at nothing, a low guttural sound. Once I reached to pet her while she slept. She snapped awake and ran. I don't know what Cliff did in those 3 days, but something in her eyes tells me it's not over. The neighbor. Who knew too much? I wanted simple, a modest house in a quiet Spokane cul-de-sac. No big maintenance, no downtown noise. I found a single-story home with a small porch, a weathered fence, and a yard I could mow in 20 minutes. The neighborhood was idyllic. Retirees leaving tomatoes on my porch, kids drawing chalk dragons, a beagle barking at clouds. It felt like a fresh start. Carol lived next door. On my second day, she brought blueberry cobbler, her smile warm. "I'm always around," she said. And she was, sweeping a spotless walkway, rearranging perfect flower pots, pruning flawless hedges. Sometimes I'd catch her in her window just watching. I chalked it up to loneliness. Weeks in, we chatted by the fence. I mentioned liking the quiet. She nodded, then said, "Haven't found that creaky board by the laundry room yet, huh? Always got me." I froze. "You've been inside?" I asked. She laughed. "Used to help the old owners clean. Miss it." I let it slide, but it nagged me. Days later, she brought cookies, sat on my porch and said, "Your laundry room's cramped. Should have swapped it with the office." My office had no windows. The laundry room's only window was frosted. How did she know? That night, I checked sight lines from her yard. You couldn't see much unless you were right against the house. I set a broom against the back door's interior, a test. After groceries, it was moved. Not fallen, but neatly leaned against the opposite wall. No signs of a break-in. I started locking my bedroom door. Then I found a ladder against our shared fence aligned with my bathroom window. Carol brushed it off as trimming branches, but there were none. My cameras pinged at 3:07 a.m. one night. Carol stood just beyond my fence under the bathroom window, motionless for 5 minutes before leaving. I showed the police. They said she hadn't crossed onto my property, so they couldn't act. I installed blackout curtains, locked every door. The cameras kept pinging, always 2 to 3 a.m., always her, sometimes tilting her head as if listening. I broke my lease early, left furniture behind and moved. The last night I watched the footage. Just before walking away, Carol looked straight at the camera and smiled. If these stories chilled you, like and share with a friend who loves a scare. Got a creepy neighbor tale? Drop it in the comments or email me. Subscribe for more eerie stories and stay safe. Reality's scarier than fiction.